So my sense about my move here and my impulse to move here was about the ongoing raising of my vibration that I'm experiencing, and being here for a stretch of time where I could see the effects that it was having. I mean, it was just so easy to stay lined up, and even though I had a long enough stretch where I had all different kinds of experiences. So I just want to understand more about that elementally. Like, is this an energy vortex of some sort, or is it just simply...
Well, you could call it an environment of pure energy. In other words, there are more thoughts of appreciation in relationship with the thoughts of worry or trauma. In other words, it is an environment that is more conducive to connection. We're not really encouraging that you go to an island where it is easier to stay aligned in order to be aligned, although we do not think that there is anything more appropriate than to be aligned. And we are certainly not either suggesting that you should go to some harder place and where it is more challenging to be aligned. And we would say to almost anyone, in fact it is the reason very often that people travel here at all, is because it can often serve as a sort of jump start to help them regain their connection. But it is about that. It is about let us back up just a little bit and give you the reason in terms of your electricity or physics of it. Everyone who offers a thought is a projector of electricity, so to speak, a sort of radio signal. And imagine that you are in a city where there are 500 radio towers projecting, and they are all projecting signals on a similar band. It's like Jerry and Esther in their monster bus have a CB radio, which they rarely turn on, but occasionally, if they are wanting information about weather, or if the traffic is jammed up and they think someone on the radio might know what it is about, they will turn it on. And it's an interesting thing, because when they get into a real traffic jam with lots of other trucks and motorhomes, and everyone is trying to talk on their CB radio at once, no one really can hear anything. It's just sort of a staticky, chaotic mess, where when they are out driving across the highway and they want to talk to the truck that is coming toward them, and they are the only two on the frequency, they can have a very comfortable conversation. And so it is along those lines. When you live in an environment where there are a lot of people that are feeling similarly, they are feeling at one, they are feeling satisfied with their experience, and the predominance of the thoughts that they are projecting are about that. And even the tourists that come are finding appreciation. They've come with the intent to set aside a part of their life where they can have some pleasure. And so it is, as you say, a vortex of greater appreciation. Just the mere fact that there are fewer people in ratio to the land mass. In other words, you could be in the desert and also experience a similar experience. Now, when you think about it, every thought that has ever been thought still exists. But the thoughts gather together in a sort of magnetic attraction. So someone could move to the island, get all interested in something, open a huge vortex, and you, if you were sensitive to energy, could feel the fluctuation in the vibration. And that's why we're saying it isn't really a good idea to worry too much about why it's easier or not so easy to be connected. It is a much better idea to say, under any and all circumstances, I have learned to find my balance. But that is a reason that it is easier in some cases than others. We notice that many of you are offering your vibration in response to what you are observing. And you really can't get around that, nor would we want you to. This is your creative workshop, and what you are observing is, in fact, a big part of helping you to conclude or to determine your desires. The very desires that are born within you are born out of this combination of things that you are observing. But still, we are always wanting to emphasize that you are teachers and creatures of unconditional love. In other words, you came forth intending to stay connected to source energy no matter what. You see? Yes.
So, and my last little bit is that I understand your response to why it's easier to get a clear response from Abraham through Esther than with my own dialogue that happens. And I'm wanting to know if there's anything that I can be doing that will help that communication be clearer. I mean, we're way past the letters with the nose. You know that, obviously, because it's you. But I'm just wondering if there's things you would recommend that I do.
Well, the most important thing is don't compare your experience to any others. Let your experience be the unique experience that it is. Because when you imply that the communication is clearer for you to receive it through Esther, we would say that in some ways yes and in some ways no. You mentioned earlier, or it was mentioned earlier, that we utilize Jerry and Esther and the examples of their life a great deal. And there are really two reasons for that. One is that we have their seeming compliance with that. In other words, we don't find them resisting at the idea of us exposing the intricacies of their life experience. They are willing to do that. But the other reason is because they are living it, it is easier for us to project our knowing and for Esther to translate it through the framework of her own life than it is for her to translate it through the framework of any other. And so it is for you. In other words, your inner being can communicate with you more clearly about the things that are important and meaningful to you than through any other. And so as you relax, as you say, it's gone way beyond the nose waving in the air, accept that it is evolving and enjoy the evolution of it. And most of all, you've heard us say this many, many times today, but not necessarily pointed right at this particular subject. Be happy with it as it is, anticipating its continued evolution, because it will continue to be more and more and more. Jerry, 15 years ago, or thereabouts, as this all began, it was in 1985 when Esther received her first nose wagging from us. And as we began to express verbally through Esther, Jerry was certain that he had never heard anything more profound or clear, or that he ever would. In other words, he believed that he had found the source to all that he wanted to know. And he would be the first to tell you that it has been a continuing, evolving, ongoing process. In other words, he is coming to understand that it will continue to change and be more. Yes, indeed.
All right.
Thank you very much for being here on Maui. And my question goes to the deeper meaning of illness, mental illness, and how you would treat mental illness without drugs. And I'm talking panic attacks, depression. Some people have obsessive compulsive behavior, agoraphobia. I mean, I'm getting into the nitty-gritty of specifics of illness.
Big topics, quite a variety, and yet all same in the sense that, well, first let us answer the question that you presented first. How would you go about treating mental illness without drugs? The first thing that we would do is convey our knowing that the current experience is not as deviant or abhorrent as the label implies. Because we think the reason that the illness, the mental illness, exists to begin with is because so many have tried to standardize, and there is a sort of rebellion that is taking place on the part of the individual to have the experience outside the standard that is being applied. In other words, there just isn't anything much worse than for somebody to behold you and to just flat out let you know in all of the ways that they can do that you don't meet the standards. And it is an interesting thing when you've all come with such variety, wanting to give balance to the whole. And so your society tends to want to make you all the same, while you keep coming forth from the non-physical energy intending to be quite different. And so the first thing we would say is, we would not give you the label of illness, we would give you the label of difference, but we would give us all the same label of difference, and so we are all the same in that way. In other words, what we see in the majority of cases where the label of mental illness has been applied. And of course there are exceptions, but this is by far and away the dominant thing that is at the heart of it. A free-flowing spirit is feeling confined or trapped in the environment in which it is focused through the human experience. And so is either withdrawing for a sense of survival, or is squirting out in other odd ways. Mm-hmm. In other words, the multiple personalities is about this spirit wanting to rambunctiously express in an environment that seeks to confine, and so the conscious mind is trying to rein it in while the non-physical part is trying to express out. So it keeps squirting out in different ways until the consciousness learns how to suppress that and suppress that and suppress that and suppress that. And of course, almost every specific case that you would express would have somewhat different ramifications, and we could spend a whole day talking about each one of them. Mm-hmm. But that is what is at the heart of most of it. And the cure or remedy that would go so far so fast in all would be a sort of blanket acceptance of who people are and a withdrawing of the desire to label them as inappropriate. And if that could be done, the majority of it would diminish right before your eyes. Mm-hmm. Who gets to decide how we should be, or who we should be, or how we should think? In other words, it is almost without exception someone's attempt to rein you in that causes the rebellion that we think is labeled mental illness. We think mental illness, if you are wanting to put it in a nutshell and answer it easily, it is a sort of rebellion, a sort of saying, I'm not going to be corralled, I'm not going to be held back, I'm not going to be suppressed. I'm going to be beyond that. What brings forth your question?
Well, what brings forth the question is I've been on medication for 10 years, and I'd really like to be off of it. I feel that it's become almost I guess it would be a crutch, because I have the fear that if I don't have the medication, then I'm going to spiral down into this dark tunnel that I once was in.
Well, then, taking the action of releasing the medication is not appropriate action for you at the time, is it? In other words, we heard us say earlier that to do something that you believe would have negative ramifications is not a good thing to do.
True. Mm-hmm.
And so, earlier, you heard us say, and we want to apply it to this as well, just sort of go with it. Just sort of go with it. Mm-hmm. Don't try to fight against it. Just sort of go with it. Mm-hmm. And what we notice, it is a very usual thing as we look into the faces of those who come to these gatherings as we move about with Jerry and Esther from city to city. It is a very usual thing to find among you who are here with us those who have been labeled alcoholic, or those who have been labeled manic depressive, or those who have been labeled mentally ill in one way or another. And what pleases us about that so much is that you're an intense group of teachers who have come forth with an exaggerated intention to understand. Mm-hmm. So we haven't touched on this fully today, but we want to brush on it just a little bit here, that when you have a strong desire, so there is a lot of energy moving through you, beliefs that contradict it shake you up in a stronger way. In other words, when you really, 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 really want something, so the energy is really, really, really moving through in a strong way, anything that gets in the way of the energy is a stronger, more shocking experience. It's like driving your car through a forest of trees at 1,000 miles an hour or 100 miles an hour. Hitting the tree is a big deal, where if you're only going 5 miles an hour and you hit the tree, it's not a big deal. Mm-hmm. So what we're saying to you is you were born moving very fast. You were born with that intensity of energy. So as you bumped up against the resistance in your environment, you took it kind of hard. And so we don't think the medication is a bad thing. We think it's a good thing while you get your footing. And then little by little, you can release it if you are wanting. In other words, just be gentle about it. You will discover that you don't need it, but it certainly was beneficial in helping you find your balance, you see.